Yes, you said the correct thing, Clank, as this will be my first PS5 review and my first video game review in a while. Now, I wasn't the biggest Ratchet and Clank fan, as Jack and Daxter and Sly Cooper had my attention more than the Lombax and Robot could at the time, but I did love going commando and up your arsenal. I was surprised back when they announced that the PS5's launch window games library that another Ratchet and Clank game was announced after Insomniac Games' success with Marvel's Spider-Man, and just stick with that for the PS5's lifecycle. But I was wrong, as they have two teams working on both IPs now, which is relatively good. Will Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart be returned to form for the duo, or will this new Lombax jade longtime fans on the return to the golden age based on the mixed reception the 2016 review got? The adventure begins when Dr. Nefarious steals the Dimensionator from the duo at a parade thrown by Clank to thank Ratchet for everything he's done and to help him find the Lombaxes, but instead tries to use it to find a dimension where he always wins. The blunder damages the fabric of space and time with the fight and the opening of many dimensions all at once, one after another, with no end. After traveling through several dimensional rifts, Clank eventually arrives in a dimension where he meets Rivet, a female Lombax who refers to know Dr. Nefarious as Emperor Nefarious. Dr. Nefarious ends up in a throne room where he is mistaken for Emperor Nefarious, who is an alternate version of Dr. Nefarious, who, unlike him, has never been defeated in this dimension. Ratchet, meanwhile, is alone and starts his search for Clank and a way back home. With Emperor Nefarious currently not in his office and on a conquest, Dr. Nefarious assumes his identity and sends his minions after Ratchet and Rivet and gets a taste to what it feels like to finally win. The story, to me at least, doesn't feel like a Ratchet and Clank story, but more so a Rivet and Kit story with Ratchet and Clank along for the ride. I know that you have to explain the new characters and their motivations or you won't care about them, but I wish we got more Ratchet development than his reasoning for hesitating to find the Lombaxes, which is a valid and interesting take that over the years of saving the galaxy, Ratchet has imposter syndrome. He states that the reason he stopped looking for the other Lombaxes is that his life is great and Clank is the only family that he needs. That maybe he is a failure from a Lombax perspective, as Lombaxes did this way before Ratchet started to do so. So, retrospect, it might be small potatoes if the Lombaxes hear that this is the only thing he's accomplished, or that the Lombaxes themselves weren't what they hyped themselves up to be, and he was the black sheep that got ousted. I did like the story thread being addressed since into the Nexus, but if people wanted more development from Ratchet, it stops here and it goes into what people feared the most. Lombaxes, 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 and it flips over to Rivet. On the other side of the coin, or in this case the dimension, we have Rivet and a tale of what would have happened if the heroes never banded together and try to do things on their own, and that's the story of Rivet. Her journey parallels Ratchet to the point where she's a Lombax trying to find her place in the universe and understand why she was left behind. But unlike Ratchet, she has had an extreme distrust of mechanical life forms, and not just because most of them worship Emperor Nefarious. In the game and talking with Clank, we find out why Rivet doesn't trust mechanical beings. Much is on one mission she got cocky and was caught by a warbot, but escaped at the cost of her arm. We see that if you gain Rivet's trust, as Clank did, she will treat you like family and do everything in her power to help, and even give you a nickname like Bolts for Clank. Then we have a character who wasn't shown, Kit, the warbot doppelganger for Clank, who is an apprentice to Gary, an overseer to the dimensions for his father, the plumber, who we find out is a godlike being all along in this omniverse. Kit is just trying to find a place to belong with Gary and the monks because she's a warbot but doesn't want to hurt anyone. We eventually find out that Kit was the warbot who took Rivet's arm during the prison break and comes back to help Rivet in the final battle against Nefarious and Emperor Nefarious. As for the Nefarious' plot relevance, I think they should have made a new villain instead of getting Dr. Nefarious again, but this time it's the unsuccessful and successful versions kind of teaming up to take complete control until one gives the other the idea to conquer all dimensions. Don't get me wrong, it was a fun story, but there's a limit to how much Nefarious can show up and be the main villain. Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart is the pinnacle of the series so far, as they took the base from Ratchet and Clank 2016 and improved upon it. For any longtime Ratchet fans, know that this game series didn't have quick select, strafing, running, or even dashing, which are all present here. I thought it was amazing that they addressed one of the problems: Ratchet's movement speed was too slow to run and gun, so they fixed that by having the Lombax being able to run and dash, adding a new layer to combat that allows you to dodge attacks if you stay aware of your surroundings. Next was the tether, which was advertised heavily and was fun to use to make a quick getaway and regroup, and the puzzles made you constantly use them to solve the problem at hand. Also, there were times where you could see through the rifts of other locations already loaded in thanks to the SSD. I just thought that was real neat. Next, we have the weapons. We have a mixture of the old and returning weapons from the past, as well as some new ones. One of my favorite is the Topiary Sprinkler, with how devastating it is when you level it up, and it also works on mini bosses and bosses alike by immobilizing them and stacking damage. Another one that I loved was the Lightning Rod, as when you level it up and upgrade it, it will chain and stun enemies together if they're in proximity to one another. Once you get later on into the game, there is one called the Black Hole Storm, which is a chain gun that you can use to pepper enemies with tons of rounds, and when you upgrade it, it will cause black hole explosions upon killing an enemy, so you can mow down all the robots that you want to kill. They also had one that I love, which is all reliable, the Rocket Launcher, the Warmonger, which when leveled up will cause mini rockets to home in for extra damage upon the main missile detonating. And one weapon that was different this time around, but is a staple to the Ratchet and Clank series, the Rhino, which in this version is called the Rhino 8, and it rips open portals from other dimensions and drops objects on the target. And they can range from a ship to a PlayStation cameo like Jak and Daxter or Sly Cooper showing up, which was actually pretty cool. Like with Going Commando Onward, you can level up your weapons to level 5 and to level 10 Omega weapons in the New Game Plus mode. Don't worry, as Ratchet and Rivet share weapon unlocks and EXP, so you don't have to buy them over again or grind more to have the same weapon loadout as either Lombax. There are no real complaints about the combat other than to make Ratchet and Rivet a little bit more unique to play as, but I can see how that might put people off if each Lombax could do only certain actions and that you'd have to come back later as that Lombax or in a certain section of the storyline as that Lombax to do whatever they need to do. The haptic triggers are a blast to use, as it allows you to have burst firing for pinpoint shots or an easier way to remember alt modes for guns. I just wish they brought back more classic weapons than just having 20 guns, but the ones they chose were really good and I had a blast with all of them. I suppose one added feature that Insomniac added from Spider-Man, which was amazing on their part, was customizable costumes for the characters to wear. I've loved showing my style in the cutscenes, making it more personal in a way, and they get brownie points for me that we can change the colors to fit how we think the characters would wear those costumes or clothing. Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart is amazing on a technical level. To see what Insomniac Games was able to accomplish on the PS5, from the reflections in the eyes to the fur textures, it is the beginning of what the first party can do on the hardware. Should you get the game? Yes, as it's a fun story that's easy to get into and isn't complicated, but if you are a hardcore Ratchet and Clank fan, this game will leave you a feeling of wanting more. And by that, I mean it feels like filler or a jumping on point before the real arc starts, because in Rift Apart, we are mostly focusing on and following Rivet and Kit's story with Ratchet and Clank along for the ride. You'll get more out of the lore hunt, though, finding out that Rivet might not be Ratchet's doppelganger after all. Rift Apart has gotten me back on the bus, and I want to see what happens with Ratchet, Rivet, Clank, and Kit in the future. This should be it for this thoughts video, my first one after a while, very long while, but it felt good doing it again. And I plan to do more, so be on the lookout for that. Anyways, stay safe guys, and I'll see you on the next one.
Thanks for having me! You picked a winner. Where's my room in top billing?
I should be like you now.